Let's start at the end. I want you to imagine something. The day is September 12th, 1185.
And the location, the Hippodrome of Constantinople.
Right. And what's happening there isn't a chariot race. It's the horrific finale to a reign that promised so much and just delivered chaos.
A scene of just unimaginable public vengeance.
Exactly. The former emperor, Andronikos I Komnenos, is suspended upside down by his feet between two columns. His body's already been mutilated for 3 days.
And the mob, just desperate, enraged.
Yeah.
They literally tear him apart, the last emperor of his dynasty.
What a way to go.
Andronikos I Komnenos, he ruled Byzantium from 1183 to 1185, and he is one of those figures that history just struggles to categorize.
It's a complete contradiction.
A total contradiction. The sources paint him as this charismatic, brilliant man, the last great personality of the Komnenian line, really, and he took power promising to save the empire from corruption.
But his reign, just 2 years. It became this paranoid tyranny that, actually hurried the empire's decline.
It absolutely did.
So for you, the learner, our mission here is to move past that sensational death and really understand the full arc of his life. We need to unpack how this dazzling adventurer became a ruthless tyrant.
And why his reforms, which were, on paper, pretty sensible, why they failed so spectacularly.
Okay, let's unpack this.
To get the paranoia that defined his reign, you really have to understand the decades of adventure that defined his youth.
He wasn't always a tyrant locked in a palace.
Oh, not at all. He was a cousin of the Emperor Manuel I Komnenos, and by all accounts, just physically and intellectually brilliant. Tall, handsome, brave, eloquent. He's described as one of the most colorful personalities of the age.
But that charisma came with monumental recklessness, right? Yeah. Especially when it came to the imperial family.
That's putting it mildly. His early life was this constant cycle of political maneuvering and what historians diplomatically call scandalous romances.
So we're talking about serial seduction and betrayal, basically, right inside the court.
Precisely. His rivalry with Manuel often came out as, romantic challenges. He seduced Eudokia Komnene, who was Manuel's own niece.
And that didn't go over well, I assume.
Her family tried to assassinate him. He had to literally cut his way out of a tent with his sword to escape. That's the kind of life he was living.
So that leads to exile, but he doesn't exactly go quietly into retirement.
Not a chance. He flees after seducing Philippa of Antioch, and she was the sister of Manuel's wife, so even more scandalous.
Wow.
He then travels to Jerusalem and, just keeps going. He seduces the Dowager Queen, Theodora Komnene, who also happened to be his cousin's daughter.
It's all in the family.
It is. But Theodora was described as the love of his life. They actually eloped and lived as fugitives for over a decade. And this period shows his key strength. Just extraordinary cunning and unbelievable ability to survive.
Right. I think that's important. This isn't just recklessness, it's a kind of strategic brilliance. Earlier in his life, he was imprisoned for conspiracy.
And he broke out twice.
The first time, this is amazing, he escaped through an underground passage he dug with his bare hands.
And the second time shows that theatrical flair we see later. He was captured by some Vlach tribesmen, and he faked having infectious diarrhea to get some time alone.
Okay.
Then he built a dummy out of his cloak and hat, put it in a squatting position in a field, and just slipped away while the guards were patiently watching the figure from a distance.
That's brilliant. But let's think about the political side of this. He spends more than a decade living as a rogue, a wanted man. Does that actually prepare him to govern an empire, or does it just hardwire that paranoia?
It absolutely ingrained the paranoia. He only came back to Constantinople in 1180 because imperial officials finally captured Theodora and their children. He forced his hand.
So he comes back.
And he stages this huge theatrical return. He's publicly begging for forgiveness from Manuel with a chain around his neck. It works. He's allowed to retire to a sort of internal exile. He'd humbled himself, but you just know the ambition was still simmering.
And that ambition finds its moment right after Manuel I dies in 1180. The whole political scene was, what, a powder keg?
A total powder keg. The heir, Alexios II, is only 11 years old, and the regency is held by his mother, Maria of Antioch.
This is the perfect power vacuum.
Exactly. And Maria was widely disliked for two very specific reasons. First, she was of Western European or Latin origin.
And second, she was seen as favoring the Italian merchants, the Venetians, the Genoese, who had grown incredibly wealthy and powerful in the capital.
Right, and often at the expense of the local Byzantine merchants. The sources make it clear that resentment was just boiling over. There was this intense anti-Latin populism.
So Andronikos, who's now in his mid-60s, sees his chance.
He sees his opening. He marches on Constantinople in 1182, but he positions himself not as a tyrant, but as this impartial, patriotic elder statesman, the champion of the young Alexios II.
And this move, it immediately had horrific consequences. His arrival triggers the notorious massacre of the Latins in April 1182.
It's an immediate descent into chaos. Mobs, convinced they were restoring Roman virtue, just start slaughtering Western residents.
Yeah.
And what's really damning is Andronikos' response.
He does nothing.
He does less than nothing. He makes zero effort to stop it. He actually referred to the violence as a restoration of Roman affairs.
The brutality is just shocking. We're talking 60,000 Western Europeans killed or forced to flee. And the details. They decapitated a papal delegate and tied his head to a dog's tail.
It was a diplomatic catastrophe. It permanently poisoned relations with the West and gave them a justification for revenge later on.
So with the capital terrified and his opposition gone, Andronikos starts clearing his path to the throne. The populist mask comes off.
And the cold ruthlessness comes out. He has Maria of Antioch tried for treason and strangled. Then, in September 1183, he's crowned co-emperor shortly after that.
He is a boy emperor, Alexios II, strangled, his body put in a lead coffin and thrown into the sea.
And then, the final act of depravity. To solidify his claim, the elderly Andronikos marries Alexios II's widow, Agnes of France.
She was only 11 or 12 years old.
Just a child. It was a purely political move to bring her powerful French connections under his control.
So now he's emperor, and his reign it's like a study in administrative schizophrenia. On one hand, he's a genuine reformer.
He was. He was determined to dismantle the aristocratic machine that was draining the state. He launched a massive anti-corruption campaign.
So what did he actually do? What were these reforms?
Well, he overhauled the tax system to get rid of the corrupt tax farmers. This actually eased the burden on the peasantry and helped the provinces. And crucially, he forbade the sale of government offices. He wanted positions awarded on merit, not bribery.
Okay, those sound like pretty sensible, necessary changes for a state in decay.
They were.
But if he's killing all the experienced administrators and generals who could actually implement those policies, weren't they doomed from the start?
And that is the central tragedy of his reign. The reforms were sound, but his methods turned sensible policy into terrifying tyranny. He became pathologically paranoid. He believed every nobleman was after his throne.
Which leads to the Reign of Terror.
Exactly. He gets that terrifying nickname, Misa Face.
The hater of sunlight.
Because of the huge number of enemies he had blinded. Suspicion alone was enough to get you arrested in the night, dismembered, or impaled. And it wasn't just in the capital, when the cities of Nicaea and Prusa revolted.
This is where we see his cruelty become psychological warfare. He puts Isaac Angelus's mother on top of a battering ram during a siege.
Daring the rebels to kill her if they defended their own walls. It's just medieval horror.
And this brutality against the ruling class, it must have had huge structural consequences.
Immediate ones. The Komnenian system, which had kept the empire stable for a century, relied on a loyal class of aristocratic military families. Andronikos violently purged this very class.
So he didn't just kill individuals, he basically decapitated the empire's command structure.
He did, and the surviving nobles. They fled, they scattered across the Mediterranean, actively looking for foreign help to overthrow him. They invited intervention.
Which created even more instability.
Massive instability. His own cousin, Isaac Komnenos, seized Cyprus and started ruling it as an independent state.
And the final deal for all this internal chaos, it arrives in 1185, doesn't it?
It does, in the form of a Norman invasion led by William II of Sicily. This was partly revenge for the 1182 massacre.
And the empire is in no shape to fight back.
Not at all. The Normans advance almost unopposed on Thessaloniki, the empire's second city. The purge has meant the state simply lacked the experienced generals to organize a defense.
And the sack of Thessaloniki was horrific.
Horrifyingly brutal. And the shock of it turned his own populous base in Constantinople completely against him. The capital is just engulfed in panic.
So Andronikos, this master of survival, starts to panic himself.
He gets desperate. He was never very religious, but now he consults an oracle to name his successor. And the name that comes back is Isaac Angelos.
The noble whose mother he'd used as a human shield.
The very same. So this leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy. Andronikos immediately sends his agent, a man named Stephen Hagiochristophorytes, to arrest Isaac.
But Isaac knows this is a death warrant.
He fights back. He kills the agent on the spot, and flees to the Hagia Sophia for sanctuary.
And that one small act is the spark.
That's all it took. The desperate, terrified mob in the city proclaims Isaac Angelos emperor. The revolution happens in a single chaotic day.
Andronikos tries one last
trick. He throws on a monk's robe and tries to flee by boat. But this time, his luck runs out.
The wind.
Strong winds push his boat right back to shore. He's captured, dragged back, and paraded before the new emperor, Isaac II Angelos.
Then Isaac just hands him over to the mob.
He does. And what follows is a reckoning for 3 years of rage. The sources call it a public seminar in cruelty. Everyone wanted a piece of him.
For 3 days.
For 3 days, they systematically mutilated him. His right hand was cut off with an axe, beard torn out, teeth pulled out, head shaved. One eye was gouged out. Cow dung was poured over him.
Yet the accounts say he was brave through all of it.
Almost superhumanly so. He never begged for mercy. He just endured it.
Until the final act in the Hippodrome.
He was suspended by his feet. 2 Latin soldiers, and this is probably symbolic revenge for 1182, competed to see whose sword could penetrate his body more deeply. He was finally stabbed in the throat and died.
And they left his body there.
Unburied. Visible for years as a warning.
The immediate reaction was what they call damnatio memoria.
Right. An official erasure of his memory. All his statues, images, paintings were destroyed. But you know what's fascinating is how modern scholars see him.
They don't just see him as a monster.
Not entirely. They largely agree his domestic reforms, the anti-corruption stuff, the checks on the aristocracy, were largely sensible, maybe even necessary. But they were imposed too quickly and with just unimaginable violence.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, his reign really was this destructive turning point. By purging the aristocracy, he destroyed the system that held the empire together.
The vacuum he created directly enabled the Norman invasion, and you could argue left the empire fundamentally broken for when the Fourth Crusade showed up less than 20 years later. His effort to save the state basically guaranteed its ruin.
Though the family name didn't completely die out.
That's true. His descendants, his grandsons, managed to flee and establish the Empire of Trebizond, which actually lasted all the way until 1461.
So to synthesize this for the listener, to get to the 5 key nuggets on this incredibly intense figure.
Okay. First, Andronikos. I was the last of the Komnenos dynasty, and he was known for his charisma and this scandalous, adventurous life long before he ever took the throne.
Second, his rise to power was completely fueled by popular anti-Latin sentiment, which he used to get into the capital, leading to the horrific massacre of the Latins in 1182.
Third, as emperor, he was this dual figure, an effective reformer who helped the common people, but also a paranoid tyrant, the hater of sunlight, known for his unbelievable brutality.
Fourth, his ruthless purges weren't just personal. They actively destroyed the military and administrative structure of the state, which directly invited foreign invasion and led to the sack of Thessaloniki.
And finally, number 5. His downfall was marked by one of the most savage public deaths in history, with 3 days of torture by a mob in the Hippodrome, a symbol of the state's total loss of control.
So what does this all mean? The man who seized power, promising to restore the empire's glory, ends up destroying the very foundations his own family had built.
It leaves you with the question, right? Was his brutality a necessary evil applied too quickly, or just the mad rage of a tyrant?
And it really makes you consider how often sweeping reform, when it's pursued through a reign of terror, ultimately consumes the reformer and leaves behind not stability but fragmentation and weakness that just invite the next disaster. A chilling lesson from the 12th century that still feels, well, pretty potent today.